Okay, welcome back. So we're now jumping into another photograph. Some of these have different challenges or different processing styles. So here's an image that I took in South Georgia a couple years ago of a large colony of king penguins. And so let's process this guy. So the first thing that I want to do on here is crop. On the right hand side, you'll notice that I have a couple little white breasts sticking out. That draws the attention of the viewer to that area of the scene, and I'm not particularly thrilled with that. But also, I think that our horizon is not level. So let's kind of jump in with that tool. Let's get into the cropping tool. Maybe the first thing we'll do is we're going to follow the horizon line near the top of the water and just follow that and arrive at a nice horizon level. And then let's see if that automatically took care of our issue on the right hand side. And it looks like it did. And would I like to take anything off the bottom or the top? I don't think the top, or maybe just a little off the top and a little off the bottom. Try to give this a little more of a panorama feel. You can kind of tell that I tend to, I think, get drawn towards these panorama type photographs because I think they tell a scene a little bit easier because sometimes the foreground or the sky just isn't that interesting. Well, guess what? This sky is nothing but blue, and it's not interesting at all to me. So I'm talking myself into taking more off the sky. So now that we have a horizon that appears level, and we have a little sky taken out, a little foreground, I'm going to dock the tool. So how do I feel about this image? White balance is actually fairly important in Arctic and Antarctic regions because white is the foundation of all color. So I see that we've got some near blown out whites in the water. So why don't we start to kind of approach a better white, but we still have to address the white balance. So this is a fairly blue scene, as you can tell, but it has a white balance of 50-50. This was taken right after sunrise at about 4 o'clock in the morning. So fairly early, and basically I'm going to warm up, I'm going to cool off, and I'm going to find some place that works for me, or I can just take that white balance color picker and nail it. The problem with that is I may be finding an area that's completely blown out anyway, so that's not really that helpful. So let's kind of move it to the warmer side, maybe move it to the cooler side, and ultimately I end up exactly where I want. Maybe something around there. That warm light, I don't want to give up. We got up early for a reason. We got in those zodiacs for a reason. And so let's kind of work with the warmer light here. Now let's establish our whites, our white point. Some of these are already on the verge of being blown out or already blown out, and there's not much I can do about it. But let's bring it down, and you can notice I'm paying attention to this one area right here. But I think I'm going to just live with it. Then I'm going to do the same thing with blacks. And you'll notice that as we process more and more images for these videos, I'll start working faster and faster. I don't want to inundate the same teaching tools all the time, but I just want to give you more real-world examples of how I process images. So I made a fairly aggressive black over here on the right-hand side because I like that punch everywhere else. May not be appropriate for just a couple of pixels or small areas, but I do like a punch in an image, and so that's really important to me. Then the exposure, we're going to set it, we're going to move it back and forth, and ironically, probably exactly where it was is perfectly appropriate for what we're doing today. Then global highlights. I might actually do a global highlight recovery because all around the scene, whether it's this surf, some of the chests on some of these penguins, they all, I think, are really kind of pushing it. So let's bring some of these highlights down, but keep in mind is if I bring it down too much, it makes the image look a lot more washed out or less contrasty because I'm reducing the dynamic range of the image. And I don't want to do that too much. I want it just enough. Just enough. And if I didn't have as much control as I needed, then I would think about individually painting some areas. But to me, this looks fairly realistic. So take those highlights down a little bit. Shadows up or down. I'm going to actually just probably leave them exactly where they are because I think the shadows are perfectly appropriate. Now, we've done those basic luminance tools. We've done a white balance. We've done our whites, white point or black point, our exposure and highlight recovery. Clarity, I'm not going to mess with it yet. And we're going to be painting with this in a little while on a different image. But for now, I'm going to leave that alone because I like that mist. I like that softness, that morning light coming through all that, the surf fog, basically. It looks wonderful. And I want to keep that. However, I can accentuate it a little more by actually adding negative global clarity. And you'll notice if I take the clarity slider to the left, I can soften the image up a little bit more and make it glow. So I'm going to maybe put in just a little bit, like maybe -8 or -10, to try to soften the image as opposed to the opposite of making it more crunchy. This is a tool that if you use too much of it, the image completely breaks. So I'll illustrate what broken looks like. So I'm going to go minus about 60, and it starts to create these really, really large halos around my subjects. That is broken to me because it just looks over-processed. So I'm going to bring it back to something I think a little more realistic, maybe minus about 8 to 10. And this is slow to react right now, but it's an amount that I can live with. It's not too much, and it's a softening effect that I think is very very helpful. Okay, so now let's see what else we can do. I'd like to draw people's attention into the middle of this scene, specifically those penguins that are going out into the ocean. And what I'd like to do is use maybe a combination of tools to do that. So the first one is use the gradient on the sky to draw that down a little bit, and maybe do another gradient on the bottom at an oblong angle and paint some out to try to slowly build the vignetting effect of drawing your eye to the middle of the scene. It's easier for me to darken areas outside of my subjects than it is to brighten the area. So I'm going to bring that gradient down similar to what we've done before. Bring that down maybe 1/3 of a stop. Anything more I think starts to be a little too noticeable. So we're going to bring that down about 1/3 of a stop. Bring those highlights back up. Then without docking the tool, I can just create new and then do it again on the foreground, except I'm going to do it at an angle so it's not so obvious to see. And just a little bit of negative and a little bit of bring those highlights back up. What a big change, huh? It's a really big change just using this gradient tool without having to pull out the brush. And the brush is not always the easiest tool to hide what you're doing. I find the gradient tool to be much more useful if you just want subtle effects because it goes in very gradually and at whatever angle you want, and then you can paint out using the brush what you don't want selected. And then at the very end, remember, we get into sharpening, noise, and whether we want any color. So I'm going to create my sharpening mask by holding down the Alt or Option key and only select the areas that I want sharpened. I'd say about that. And then for the noise reduction, I'm going to leave it alone. Remember, it's all about the print. It's all about the print. So I'm going to leave that alone. And then to top it off, let's see if I want to add just a little bit of vibrance to just kind of add a little bit more punch. And there we have it. So this is a much more quickly processed photograph. Only took a few minutes, really focusing on all those luminance tools again, way up front in the workflow, and not overcomplicating things. Just trying to make everything really easy so you're not chasing your tail.